Hi there, it's Tracy Kiernan from stepbysteppainting.net, and this acrylic painting tutorial will demonstrate how to paint a patriotic jar on a 12 by 16 inch canvas. And there's a little bit of room up at the top if you wanted to add a quote. So you can do this on the 12 by 16 or you can do this on the 11 by 14. The design really works on any size canvas. I'm going to start by drawing my table line in this painting. So I marked about 3.5 inches from the bottom of the canvas. You'll have to adjust this if you're using a different size canvas, but just estimate a small area towards the bottom, and that's where our jar is going to be sitting on. And then we're going to go ahead and paint the background. So this painting has a really pretty light wood background. And the colors I used for the top part of the wood panels are Mars Black, Titanium White, and Unbleached Titanium. And I'll be using a 3/4 inch flat wash brush to be painting the top portion first. So we're going to start by loading our flat brush in some water, kind of tap it dry, leave a little bit of water left on your brush to kind of thin the paint down a little bit. Grab your titanium white and then grab a chunk of the unbleached titanium. So we want to start by gently blending the white and the beige color together, and it's going to create a really very light cream color. And when you're painting this, you want to do all left and right strokes that go across the canvas. And the trick is to try not to over blend the colors. So you want kind of like a blend of those three colors. You want to grab little tiny bits of black. You don't want to use too much black because then it's going to turn into a darker gray color. That little bit of black is going to give your light wood kind of a very light grayish tone to it. And so you just want to make sure that when you're grabbing the black that you're only grabbing little tiny bits of it, and you're just letting the white, the black, and the beige gently blend together using mostly white because again it's a very light background. Occasionally you might have spots that might turn up a little bit darker, and that's okay. If it's too dark, just wipe your brush off and then grab more of the white or the beige color. So I am on purpose kind of varying the colors. So some areas might have a little bit more gray, some might be just pure white, some might be more of a blend of the beige. You really just want a nice blend of all the colors without trying to over blend all the colors. And I'm basically going down to that table line that I drew, and I'm stopping at that table line. If you find that your paint's not spreading easily across the canvas, you could occasionally dip your brush in a little bit of water and kind of distribute that water into the paint as you're loading your brush. You just don't want to use too much water. It should not be dripping down. It's just enough to let that paint flow a little bit better and to help with the blending. And so it's basically a very thin layer of paint. You're just going to keep going all the way across. You don't want your strokes to stop in the middle. You want to make sure it's going all the way across. You don't want to see the harsh brush strokes anywhere. So when you finish the top portion, we're going to do the bottom table portion. And I used almost all the same colors, except I added the color Raw Sienna to my palette. That's going to give us our very light, warm brown color that we have at the bottom part of our wood where the jar is sitting on. And you'll want to freshen up your titanium white and the beige color. You should still have black left because we didn't use very much of that black for the background, and we'll only use tiny bits of it for the table as well. So we're going to go ahead. I'm not going to rinse my brush off because I'm going to be using these same colors. I'm going to grab my Raw Sienna and grab the beige and grab the white. About equal parts, a little bit more of that Raw Sienna than the other colors, and a teeny tiny bit of black. You don't want a lot of black for this. That black is going to kind of darken it a little bit, give it kind of a gray tone to it. Teeny bit of water in there, kind of thin it out a bit and apply it. So this one is more of a color that I mixed on my palette instead of mixing on the canvas. I want to achieve this kind of a golden, almost an oak color. with that paint. But when I go to kind of mix it again, I might not mix it all the way on my palette. I might not be the same color. So this time a little bit more black ended up in there, and that's okay. A little bit of black streaks aren't going to hurt. A little bit of white to kind of lighten that up. And basically you're just painting your table area below that line, and it should show up darker than the top part because we added that raw sienna into it. And you want to just go ahead and fill your entire bottom table line. Just be really careful not to go above that line. You can use the tip of the brush to cut in on that line. You could use painter's tape for this. I didn't grab any painter's tape for this, but you could use painter's tape, or you can use like a T-square ruler to kind of help you get that edge in. Just do the best you can not to go above that line. So I'm going to use my T-square here to get that line really straight. Use the tip of my ruler to cut in on that line, and then I'll go ahead and lift my T-square and then get the rest of this painted. Just like the background, it's okay that your colors are not blended all the way. It's okay if there's darker streaks or lighter streaks in there. That adds to the whole faux wood look that we're trying to achieve. Next, we're going to divide our wood areas up into panels. These panels are going in a horizontal direction. And so basically, I'm going to be using a different brush for this, and I'm going to grab my T-square ruler to help me achieve these horizontal lines. So I'll go ahead, rinse my 3/4 flat brush off and set that to the side, and I'll be using a number 4 round brush for this next step. I want to make a darker color than the background, so I'm going to mix on my palette kind of the same color, but add a little bit extra black to it so that it will show up darker. I'm basically going to paint wood texture lines, and I'm going to be painting horizontal lines that go across and divide my background up into 3 panels. So you don't have to measure this evenly. If you want to, you can, but I don't think it really makes a difference if you make it even. So on the palette, grab some black and some raw sienna, add some white to it. It should be a darker color than the background, enough to show up. Not too dark. If it was pure black or super dark, it's going to make the background look a little bit too busy and the focus won't be too much on the bouquet. We want it kind of a subtle but darker than the background. And just take your T-square and find a spot towards the bottom. Lay your T-square down and make a very loose horizontal line going across. By loose, I mean it's not a continuous line. I'm holding the brush lightly. I'm kind of picking it up so the line is not continuous, and I'm kind of making it so the middle part is not exactly like super dark, because I know there's going to be a bouquet, a jar in the middle, so if I don't want to like cover up a lot of the middle with too much wood texture. And then after you divide it into 3 sections, so I did 2 horizontal lines. Also really important when you're doing the line with, if you're using the T-square, make sure you wipe off the ruler after you go ahead and do your second line, because you don't want to accidentally use that paint that's on the ruler to make a mark that you don't want on the canvas. So wipe your ruler off. And then take your brush and just paint some wood texture lines. So I just did some random like horizontal lines. Again, not really focusing on the middle part, because the middle part is where my jar is going to be, and a lot of that's going to be painted over anyway. I did some knots, so I did like a elliptical shape thing, and then some curvy contouring lines around it, but mostly little horizontal lines, very subtle, so nothing too busy. It's still very light and very subtle, but just enough to give it that wood look. I did the same thing for our bottom table area, except I made this color just a teeny bit darker by adding a little bit more black to it because the table area is darker than the background area. A little bit of black, but not solid black, so it shouldn't be super dark. And I also divided this up into panels, so grabbed my T-square again, very, very loose line that really just kind of picks up right there in the middle. Did not want to disturb the middle area where I will be painting my jar, so I just kind of left that middle area open. But I also did the wood texture thing, so I did little knots, I did little horizontal lines kind of all over that, just kind of very loosely use the tip of the brush. I'm not pressing hard with this brush at all, holding it very lightly and using just the few little tips of those bristles to create those intricate thin lines. Then I kind of went in right here where our table line is that meets the wall, and I went in and just loosely added a line right there at the top just to make that division a little bit darker. You don't have to do this, it's a very subtle detail, but again, a dark color but not super black, so just teeny bit of black in there. Took that and just loosely outlined the very edge of that table to make that piece dark. The next step that we're going to do is draw the jar, and you want to make sure everything on your canvas is dry so you can take a break and come back, or use blow dryer, dry it really quick. It should dry relatively quick because these lines are very thin and not thick layers of paint at all. So our jar, we're going to start by kind of finding the center part of the table area and draw the bottom curve of our jar. So just take your pencil, draw a curved line, and I recommend that you grab a T-square ruler to kind of help you line this up. You don't have to do this, but it kind of helps get the jar to be a little bit even, so the tops of this curved line, they both meet at that horizontal mark where I placed the ruler. And then I can take this and place it over here in the bottom of the canvas, and I'm going to do two vertical lines. So our jar shape has two vertical lines that are parallel with each other on each side. I'm going to use that ruler to get my lines to be vertical on both of those edges, and we'll round the bottom too next, so don't worry about that. So two vertical lines. Don't worry about how high. You can make it go all the way up if you want, but we just using those lines to help us create our jar. So right here is rounded instead of a corner, so I'm just going to take that and round both of those bottom pieces. So we have two vertical lines, a curved line on the bottom, and they meet together and are rounded. So then we want to start to form our jar. So in this piece, it rounds upwards on both sides. I'm just going to take that and kind of create a tangent rounded line on both sides. So I'm just sketching this out. I can erase, and it curves inwards because it's a jar, so we have like a really short neck of this bottle, and then it curves up. So this neck piece is center inside the jar. I can always take my T-square and line this up to make sure, okay, so this part curves at the same part on each side. So this kind of like an S line that curves up, and try to make it even on each side. Doesn't have to be perfect. We'll take this, curve that up, curve this down. And bring this up a little bit more narrower in the center. And our top piece, horizontal line on the top piece. And I'm just going back over my lines, erasing my stray marks. So this vertical line got erased, that part got erased. And then on the top part, this is actually a very thin oval shape. That's the opening of the bottle where our bouquet and flag will be placed inside. I'm going to draw some of these diagonal lines to represent our flag and bouquet, but I'm not going to draw every detail of the flowers that I'll be painting. So starting with this flag, I want to get the placement of this flag in. So basically just draw a long diagonal line going inside the jar opening at the top, and then lightly sketch your flag shape. So the flag shape is two curvy lines that are parallel to each other. The edge is straight, so you get a wavy flag. And then I drew a few more diagonal lines, kind of going crisscross in the jar. And I'm not going to do any more details with that. It would be too tedious to really draw everything right now, and that would be a lot of erasing if there's a lot of pencil marks left over after the painting portion. But this is enough to get kind of the composition that I have in mind for our bouquet, and of course I will guide you through all of this step by step. The first thing we're going to do is outline our jar shape. And so we're going to get what we drew with pencil painted on. And I used Prussian Blue, which is a really deep dark blue. If you don't have Prussian Blue, you can use phthalo blue, ultramarine blue, or any kind of dark blue color. And I used titanium white. And I'll be using the number 4 round brush. So basically, we are going to paint over what we just drew. So we're doing the jar, the edges of the jar. This is a clear jar, so we're not painting the jar, we're painting the edges of the jar. I'm going to go ahead and mix on my palette about equal amounts of Prussian and white. You'll get kind of a medium blue from this because the Prussian is a very dark blue. And water it down just slightly, a little bit of water in there to get it to flow. This shouldn't be thick, it should be a very thin, loose line. And using the tip of my brush, and I'm basically taking that medium blue color and I'm outlining what I drew with the pencil. So this is establishing our jar shape. If you want to kind of adjust your drawing as you're painting it in, that's okay. And it's okay if there's pencil lines still showing. When this dries, we will definitely erase those pencil lines. My top rim, outline that oval. Grab some titanium white and add a little bit more white to that line on the bottom. So we have the first part of kind of a blended color at the top. So a little bit of white on the bottom part of that oval piece. And then load some more white on the tip of the brush. And we're going to just kind of gently add some white to the edges of this jar. I'm going to mix my blue again. Before we do the edges, do the inner bottom piece right here. So that's the bottom part of the jar. I did that with the same color, the Prussian and the white. And then grab just the white and go back. So I'm loosely adding some white in this, but I'm not going to add white everywhere to this. So just a little bit of white on some of the edges is going to kind of give you some of the reflection in the glass. So a little tiny bit of white. It's okay if it's blending with your blue a little bit. Just that very loose line. It kind of buckled a bit, kind of more of a dashed line. So that gives that glass a little bit of a glare to that blue. So I'm just buckling my brush so it's kind of picking up, but it's not a continuous solid white line. Just a few little marks of white kind of around the edges of that glass gives it that glare color. And we're not going to do any more details in this jar right now. After we paint our bouquet in, we'll go in and we'll do the glare of the glass and the reflection, and we'll be doing that much later on. We're going to move along and start painting what's inside of our jar, and I'm going to start with the flag. So you want to load some Mars Black on your palette if it's not already there, and use your round brush to load the tip of the brush in the black. Kind of twist your brush, that'll help you with this line. So this one needs to be a continuous solid line. If you want, you can use a ruler to help you with this line, or you can just paint it in. It's okay if our line gets kind of skewed a little bit, especially in the jar, because it's glass. It's okay, it doesn't have to be perfectly straight. It's also kind of a rustic style painting, so it's loose. So all these flowers, even the flag, they're not realistic, they're very loose, and so that means that we don't have to be perfect about it. We could be a little bit more expressive about it. So when you're ready to paint your black line in, you just paint your diagonal line that you drew. So one continuous diagonal line going to the opening of the jar. You want to pick your brush up because that piece should not overlap that bottom rim part of the jar, the part that we painted white, and then goes inside the jar. We see it inside the jar because it is a clear jar. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect. And then paint the little circle on top of that mini flagpole. And I'm going to make this line just a teeny bit thicker. Again, pick it up when you get to the opening part of the jar. Then you'll want to go ahead and rinse, dry, and use Prussian Blue for the upper left rectangular part of our flag. So this one, I'm just outlining the shape. It's a curved shape because it's a wavy flag. So I want to make that rectangle going in a curved direction. I outlined that shape and paint it in solid. Then I loaded my palette with Pyrrole Red. You can use literally any red color for this. It could be cad red, it could be a deep red, a crimson red, whatever red that you have available. I just happened to grab this particular one and did the stripes. Again, it's a wavy flag, so I want to make sure my stripes are going in a curvy direction. Started with the red stripe at the top, made a curved stroke. Next line, curved stroke below that. And I'm just going to continue down and paint more red curved strokes. I'm going to extend this flag a little bit with my pencil, so I adjusted that shape a little bit because of the shape, the size of the rectangle. So another red stripe. And then I'm going to continue to do red stripes. I did not have room to do all 7 stripes, so we can just say that the stripes are kind of askewed a little bit because it's a wavy flag. And then for the white stripes, I'm letting this dry before I do the white because the white might bleed too much into the red, and so I don't want that to happen. So I'm going to let this dry before doing the white. And same with the stars over the blue portion. I waited for that to dry before I did that step. So I'm going to go ahead and start doing some of my flowers in this, and I need green because I'm going to be painting the stems first. So we have stems in our jar going kind of the opposite angle from our flag, and I used Hooker's Green Hue Permanent. I'm still using my number 4 round brush. So a little bit of water on the brush to loosen this green up a little bit, and then I darkened it with a teeny bit of black. You don't want to add too much black, just a teeny tiny bit of black in there. That's going to darken your green. And we want to go ahead and paint some of these stems. So I'm not really thinking about what stem is going to go where right now. I just want to add these stems. So let's make it an X, going the opposite way from the flag. This next one, kind of more in the center, but it's still going diagonal. Again, we're picking our brush up when we get to the front part of the top part of the jar. So I'm not overlapping that bottom rim piece at all. So that one is a little bit more vertical. We have the baby's breath in this that are kind of hanging out on each side. So those ones are going kind of more curved and kind of dangling on the sides of the jar. I'm going to make them look more a little bit branch-like. So over here on the right, curved outwards, but then they branched out into 3 branchy pieces. Same thing over here on the left, like I'm painting tree branches almost, and those are hanging out on the sides of the jar. So those are going to be the base for my baby's breath flowers. And going to mix a green, just adding a little bit of white into that so I can get some different color, and just kind of add some more random stem pieces in the jar. Again, not really thinking about what these are going to be attached to. I just quickly painted a few of those stems in. Okay, so we have our stems in, and we're going to go ahead and add the flower portion of this. I'm going to rinse my brush off. I'm still using the number 4 round brush, and I'm going to paint these blue bonnets in next. So I used Prussian Blue and Titanium White to paint these blue bonnets in. And these are flowers that are kind of cascading, going a vertical formation, kind of pointed at the top. And I started at the bottom and I worked my way up. So I am painting thick angled strokes to create these blue bonnets. I'm loading my brush in the Prussian Blue, a little bit of titanium white. That titanium white and blue are going to blend on the canvas to create kind of a varied look. But I'm doing each little stroke kind of going angled and outwards, kind of pushing my brush upwards. The blue bonnet is wider at the bottom and more pointed at the top, kind of forming a triangular conical shaped vertical flower. A little bit extra white at the top. It's more narrower at the top. And then I can go back and add more layers on this. The trick is to let our blue and white blend, but not over blend, so we can see the different variations of color. Again, I said this earlier, it's a very loose style of flower painting. We're not being super intricate about it or realistic about it. These are more expressive strokes than realistic, so very loose. Then we can go in and paint our flower on the left, so same exact technique. I made this one a little bit taller, actually it's a lot taller, and it's angling more to the left, so it's angling the opposite way from the first flower. It's longer, taller, angling slightly curved at the top, so kind of the tip part kind of curved a little bit, but same exact technique. Double loading our blue and our white, thick, short strokes, forming the shape, trying not to over blend it. Next, I'm going to paint the baby's breath in. So the two dangling pieces on the left and right of the jar. I'm going to rinse the brush off completely. Get some fresh titanium white if you need it. So we need pure white for this. And for the baby's breath, it's super easy. It's just a bunch of little dots. So I'm just loading the tip of the brush in the white and literally just dotting it. So stippling these little pieces, little clusters of white dots, and these are just dangling down on each side of the jar. The dots are overlapping a lot of the stem, but a lot of the stem is still kind of showing through because it's a dark color. Just making as many dots as I want on both sides of the little pieces that are hanging out of the jar. Next, I'm going to move along to our little geranium style flowers that we have, little red flowers. And I still used my number 4 round brush, that Pyrrole Red. Rinse the brush off and dry it. Grab your red. And again, very abstract, kind of loose style. So these flowers are little red, small petaled flowers that grow in clusters, kind of ball-like clusters, little circle-like clusters. And so I'm just going to kind of paint random little tiny 4 or 5 petal flowers with the red. And I'm going to utilize that white to kind of let that white sort of blend with that red too, and just painting clusters of little flowers. Some of them are a little further apart. Some of them haven't opened all the way, so they're just kind of maybe 3 petals and smaller and just kind of off there with a little bit of a gap away from the cluster. So I painted kind of a larger cluster closer to the opening of the jar, kind of lower, with a few flowers kind of spread apart higher than that. So just kind of double loading the brush in the red and the white. Very thick strokes, letting that white and red sort of blend together on the canvas. Few more smaller, maybe these we only see 1 petal, they haven't opened yet, just to give the impression of the geranium style flower. Maybe there's a few over here, a few little stray red flowers between some of our blue bonnets. I'm not really overlapping any of the reds over the blue bonnets. There's some that were very close to it, but I didn't want to have my red mixed with my blue, so I didn't have any of them go over the blue flowers. Just adding a few more strokes in that cluster and maybe a few more spread apart flowers. So then we're going to rinse and add stems to our geranium flowers. So we're going to connect our flowers. Making that same dark green color with the black, so mixing a little bit of black with that green, kind of loosen it up with water, load it just on the tip of the brush and kind of twist your brush when you load, and just go ahead and attach some of your far apart flowers down into the jar. We don't have to see the full stem. It could be going behind our blue flowers, but just create stems for those. And then we're going to do some leaves on this. There's not a lot of leaves in this bouquet, but there's a few. So I did one geranium leaf. So these kind of leaves are kind of rounded leaves that are kind of a wavy edge. So I just created like a shape, very organic shape over here on the left. It's kind of sticking out of the jar, so kind of a wavy sort of rounded organic shape. And then I did a few narrow pointed leaves that are kind of sticking out of the jar over on the right. I'm adding more white to my brush to lighten this green up to also make it look, give it some highlight, but also make it look like a different kind of green. So not all the greens are the same, just a few strokes of lighter green in there on top of the leaf. And then I outlined with this lighter green the outer edge of our geranium leaf. And then next we're going to paint the cotton boll flowers. So there's kind of a golden stem color for this, and I mixed that color by using raw sienna and mixing that with Hooker's green. So a little bit more raw sienna than the green, so about 3 parts of the brown color and 1 part of the green. Teeny tiny bit of black, like barely any black. That'll give it kind of a gray undertone to it. That's how I made the really pretty kind of a golden green color for these cotton boll flowers. I'm going to start by painting the little branch over here on the left. It's going to be kind of a curvy line. And then on the base or the edge of that branch, I'm going to do 3 leaf shapes. So that's going to be the base part that's going to be opening, holding our cotton. So just 3 little leaf shapes. And then this piece is going to branch out to the left, kind of curve down. And I'm going to do 3 more leaf shapes on the end of that branch. The leaf shapes are curved at the bottom and kind of point on the edges. When I remix the paint, I can add a little bit of another color in there. So I grabbed a little bit more black to darken some of this a bit more. But it should be a really pretty golden green color. And then another piece, we can have this piece kind of going off right here to the left some more. So a third piece. So there's 3 cotton boll flowers that I'm going to be painting. So each of them have a branch, and each of them have a base of 3 leaf shapes. Also, I did 2 stray leaf shapes. So there's just a random leaf kind of hanging out of this stem, and then there's another random leaf kind of hanging out over here. And then a piece that is going inside the jar, and kind of inside and then downwards. Then we're going to paint the fluffy cotton inside of each of our cotton bolls. So I'm going to rinse my brush off, and we need some fresh titanium white for this. So I grabbed some white on this one, but it accidentally picked up some of that red. So I'm going to go ahead and load my palette with some fresh titanium white. So we want to create thick strokes for this to create kind of the textured impression of cotton. So I'm going to load my brush in a very thick amount of white paint. Start with our top cotton boll piece. I'm doing, it's like a rounded circle piece inside of that collection of leaves, and there's a little bit of blue in this, so I grabbed a little bit of Prussian blue on my paintbrush. We don't want to turn this cotton ball blue, but that blue is going to give us a bit of shading that we want, so it kind of stands out against the light background. So teeny tiny bit of blue. If you load it with too much blue, you might need to wipe your brush off and reload it in the white, but these are very thick curvy strokes, letting that blue just kind of gently blend with the white but not over blend it. A little bit more blue on the left of the cotton boll shape, and it's got kind of a wavy edge to it. It's kind of a scalloped edge to it, and that's basically it. Just really thick curved strokes forming that kind of a cotton shape. and then adding teeny tiny bits of blue in there for shading on one of the sides, but try not to overblend it and try not to make it turn blue. Just a teeny bit of blue, just that kind of blends with your white. So I did that with each of the cotton boll flowers. And then if you painted over any of the base part of the leaves, you can go back and just grab that golden green color and go back over some of your leaves. Next, we're going to paint the white stripes in the flag. So those red stripes should be dry by now. And I'm going to load some fresh titanium white on my palette, still using that round brush. And I'm just going to paint all the in-between spaces with the titanium white. And then for the stars, I didn't do actual stars. I just made little dots and going in that kind of curved direction and staggered. So just little dots. Does not have to be realistic stars. You can make those dots a little bit more shape-like by smudging the dots a little bit with your brush, but just keep it very simple. I did a little highlight on the top part of that circle, but I ended up painting over that later because I didn't like how that looked. So I'm going to make some of these little dots more smudge-like by kind of pressing down on some of them. If you have any lingering pencil marks, I would recommend to make sure your jar is dry before erasing this, but I went ahead and erased all of my lingering pencil marks that are visible on the jar because I'm going to do more detail work in the jar, specifically some of the glare. So this is, the jar is see-through, but we can still see maybe a little bit of like glass texture and glare on the jar. So I'm going to switch to a 12 bright brush, grab a paper towel, load my brush, the tip of the brush in titanium white, and wipe it off. We only want a little bit of paint on this brush, and I'm going to go ahead and paint the water line inside the jar. So I'm using just the tip of the brush to lightly kind of sketch like an elliptical shape around my stems to make it look like those stems are inside some water. So I did the line that overlaps the stems, and then it kind of goes behind the stems. Then I grabbed a little bit of blue on my brush, and I'm going to give this water kind of a bluish tint to it. You want to make sure, oops, we got some red in there. I'm going to rinse this off. Did not want red on my brush, but you want to make sure after you load your color that you're wiping it off on the towel, because we want to do a lot of this dry brush style. So blue and white, wipe it off. Dry brush just means there's not a lot of paint on the brush. It's very translucent and light. We don't want this to be solid at all. It should be very light. Just gave that elliptical shape kind of a bluish tint, and then use the full width of my brush to kind of paint a kind of a curvy water area, but I didn't paint the entire water area, just a few little strokes of that blue. And then I'm going to wipe it off, rinse, wipe, and just grab the white. I don't want to use too much blue in this. I did the bottom piece that we did earlier. I outlined that with a little bit of white, and I'm just taking the full width of the brush, doing curved strokes down the jar very lightly. It's a see-through clear jar. Then on the bottom left and right corner areas of the jar, I pressed a little bit harder on my brush for that, but it's still kind of dry brush style. I did kind of a contour stroke on the inner part of the bottom part of the jar. Gives it kind of a brighter glare in that area. Then at the top part towards the neck of the bottle, same thing, just the white curved stroke. And then kind of the upper parts, edges of that, kind of what I did at the bottom, kind of pressed harder. And I'm just going to lightly kind of add curved strokes with this dry brush kind of all throughout the jar, but I don't want to press, I don't want it to be super opaque. It should be very light and see-through because it's a clear glass jar. So curved strokes, you can go over the stem. It'll make it look like that glare of the glass is on the surface of the jar and the stems are inside of our jar. I did a few more curved strokes towards the bottom base of the jar, painting up, but again, very light. You want to just not apply a lot of color to that because it's clear and see-through. Then I grabbed my round brush back and I touched up the top opening part of my jar. So I just grabbed titanium white and I'm going back over that part, especially if I painted flowers or anything overlapping it. I want that part to be in front. So just with the white, I can even grab a little bit of blue if I wanted to, kind of touch up the back part of it, just the ribbed top part of it. Grabbed a little bit of blue in there. Don't want to over blend it. So fixed the top piece. And really the rest of this painting is kind of touch-ups wherever you feel is needed. I went into my geraniums. I wanted to add just a little bit of a dark center in some of those flowers. So I grabbed some black and mixed a little bit with the red and just kind of did like little dots inside of the flowers. You don't have to do that if you don't want to. And then I added a few more petals in there with the white and the red, just kind of touched up some of this. I just wanted a little bit of extra color variation in those geraniums. This next step is not a touch-up, it's actually something else I added. I added a shadow under the jar. I guess this can be optional too if you're a little bit intimidated by the shadow. It's okay without the shadow. But I took my flat brush and I just mixed some of the green and the raw sienna, a little bit of blue, a little bit of black. You just need a color that's kind of dark. I wouldn't use just black. I would use kind of some of those other colors in there, the browns, the blues, and watered it down slightly. And I just took my brush. It's one of those things where you don't want a lot of paint on that brush because the shadow is see-through and dry. I added a little bit of black, more black in there too, but just very barely, very lightly do curved strokes to create a shadowy area just on the bottom. And this is the conclusion of how to paint a patriotic jar. If you wanted to, you can put a quote up here at the top. There's a little bit of space, but I decided to simplify it with no quote. Beautiful arrangement of red, white, and blue flowers and a little flag in a jar. Hope you enjoyed this painting. Thanks for watching, and thanks for painting with me.